Hello and welcome back to the New View. So, uh, today we have a guest, named Swift. Hello, Swift.
Hello.
Hey, so I hope everyone's having a great day today, and I hope you're having a great day today as well.
I'm doing fine.
That's good. That's good. So, anyway, so today's topic is the election. Uh, of course, by election I mean the U.S. election. Um, because that one's huge. Um, and yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
of
lot.
course.
Wait, what? So so yeah, there's a lot to talk about because well, yeah, this election has been, oh man, it's been something else. There's not been an election like this in history. So yeah, and so just in case you guys didn't know, it's actually it's actually still election day. Uh, the race has not been called yet, actually, because the Senate still has not been called. So it is day 19 of election day. So just a little fun
Oh,
fact.
interesting.
Wait, what?
No, it's interesting. I actually didn't know about it.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's crazy. So everyone thinks the election is over. As we all know, Biden won the presidential election and the Democrats won the House, but the Senate still has not been called. It's really still anyone's game at this point, which is crazy. I don't think there's been an election this slow in history, really. This is just absolutely insane. But yeah,
Yeah,
not only that, so there's still a fight for Trump's side, which is crazy. And we're gonna explain more on that later. Because we got a whole lot to talk about today. Because let me tell you, this presidential race has been pure chaos. It's just been chaos.
yeah, it's been quite the dumpster fire for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And everyone around the world was watching this, and still is watching this because it's still going on. So, um, so yeah, um, so the election, as we all know, Joe Biden won uh, the presidential, what do you call it, presidential race. So Joe Biden is the president elect now, and the future president of the United States. So here's how. So here's the thing: the election was clearly rigged in Joe Biden's favor. I know a lot of people from the left aren't going to admit that, but I'm going to be the first to do that. The election, ever since 2019, it was clearly rigged towards Joe Biden's favor, and arguably, the media and the government already decided that Joe Biden would win about a year ahead of time. So, so we're gonna get more deep into that. So what are your thoughts on that so far?
I'm actually surprised I didn't know about that, so I'm curious as to how you've come to those conclusions. I don't know.
Yeah, it for sure is. It's for sure a pretty bold claim. Uh, no matter what side you're on. So the right is typically going to make this claim, but as you guys know, I'm a far leftist. I'm a far leftist anarchist. So me making this claim, Uh, well, a lot of people wouldn't really expect that, but I am because I clearly see through. I can clearly see through this election, and so. Uh, all right, so let's get into that. So to come to that conclusion where the election is rigged in Joe Biden's favor, we have to go back to where this race began. We have to go back to 2019, and so so we're not gonna cover uh 2019, the election in 2019 too much, because we really did in the last episode quite a lot. So we're just gonna briefly go over it and how it's related to Joe Biden today. All right, so yeah, I forgot to mention a bit from the last episode. Yeah, the last episode, we talked a lot about how 2019 became 2020. Um, and yeah, we went over a bunch of various topics, such as the election, the coronavirus, the protests, all kinds of stuff like that, and how it's all
Yes.
related. But yeah, so yeah, basically we came to a conclusion that that 2019 and 2020 aren't so different, and that 2019 was basically a pregame to 2020. Yeah, sorry I forgot to mention that earlier, but yeah, that's a bit of a recap from last episode. So, yeah, anyway, um, so yeah, in this episode, we're gonna go back to 2019 just a little bit, not too much, because again, uh, we really went over 2019 a lot in the last episode. Um, so let's go back to 2019 when the race began. Um, there were a bunch of Democrats. I'm not even gonna name them all because there were like about around 15. I don't even have the exact number, but there were 15 in those debates, and oh man, there must have been tons more running that didn't even make the debates, but yeah, the significant ones are Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, um, uh, let's see, did I miss anyone? Pete Buttigieg, um, yeah, them. Yeah, do you know if I missed anyone?
Oh no, I don't know.
Yeah, so those are, yeah, I'm not going to name them all, but those are the main ones that people really looked at. So in 2019, they were debating a lot, and I noticed during these debates, they always showed Joe Biden the most, and they gave him the longest amount of time. Uh, and the media seemed to really fixate on Joe Biden a lot. I mean, they also fixated on Bernie Sanders a lot. But yeah, it was basically, yeah, basically everyone in 2019 saw it as either Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders winning the nomination in 2020. Uh, but yeah, it was mainly focused on those two. Um, but I noticed they gave Joe Biden the most screen time. They gave him the most talk time. And the media really focused on him the most. So that was kind of alarming for me, cause cause I cause personally I always hated Joe Biden. I thought he was terrible, and I still do think he's terrible. Um, yeah, he's oh man, yeah. There's a whole lot to talk about there, but yeah, Joe Biden is he's a centrist actually, not a Democrat. And
Yep.
yeah, and we're gonna go more on that in a bit, but um, but yeah, before that, um, yeah, let's just jump into um how it's rigged towards Joe Biden first. So, all right, so yeah, the debates happened in 2019. A few people kind of got ruled out in the 2019 debates, and then 2020 happened, and the debates still continued, and the stage got smaller and smaller. Um, More candidates kept dropping out, and more candidates, uh, I mean, less candidates were allowed in the debates. So I'm going to touch on Andrew Yang just a tiny bit here. So I mentioned this a bit more in the last episode, but so Andrew Yang actually didn't get a lot of screen time and mic time. He got muted on his mic a lot, and yeah, he just wasn't represented well. I'm not saying I'm a fan of Andrew Yang or anything, but I do think it's pretty unfair how they really screwed him over, and I really
See?
do think it's because he's but yeah, so the crowd got smaller and smaller, um, and pretty soon it was down to Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, and yeah, there were. Oh yeah, I remember. Why the fuck didn't I even mention? Uh, oh yeah, fucking Mike Bloomberg. Oh yeah, so apparently Mike Bloomberg was a thing. Um, he got added to like two debates out of the what, like 11 debates, and I've seen all these debates. And Mike Bloomberg wasn't two of them. He was just randomly added to the race. Like he joined really late, and basically he put out a fuck ton of ads. And basically just bought his way into the Democratic Party and bought his way into the debates. So I'm going to talk about him just a little bit, just because I forgot to cover him in the last episode. So Mike Bloomberg, he got roasted a fuck ton in the debates. Um, yeah, the candidates just pointed out how. How he's a poor debater. Fuck Mike Bloomberg. Do you know who he is, by the way?
I mean, I've heard the name a lot, but I don't know who he is.
That's essentially what he is, just a name. He's yeah, he's really just he's a businessman, and he's rich, and he just bought his way into the Democratic debates. And basically his entire argument was, "Oh, I'll take Trump down." That's it. he didn't really have any other argument. Everything he just sort of bullshit. Like he just bullshit himself every single question. It was just terrible. But yeah, enough about Mike Bloomberg. This is about Joe Biden. So when it came down to February and March of 2020, that's when the race really started to get really tight, and it was Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders in the primaries, and in one of the debates, it was either one or two of the debates, the last one or two, where it was literally just Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. It was just them, and uh, and yeah, they debated, and so here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing about Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. So everyone in the Democratic Party thought Bernie Sanders had this. Well, at least almost everyone. The general public thought Bernie Sanders had this. Basically, almost everyone was rooting for Bernie Sanders, preparing for Bernie Sanders to win the nomination to take down Trump. But then something interesting happened, and I even touched on this in the last episode as well. So, I noticed when the race got close between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, I noticed two things. Um, so, first of all, so the last debate was in March. That was back when the coronavirus started to become a huge topic. And that's when the lockdown started to happen. And yeah, I know you don't want to talk about the coronavirus that much, but I'm only gonna touch it briefly, just in relevance to the
Okay,
election. I hope you don't mind that.
it's fine.
All right, cool. So, the coronavirus happened, and that affected the last debate. So there was no crowd in the last debate at all. It was just Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders in a room very far apart from each other, and it was really awkward. And the silence was, let's just say, it was deafening. It made the debate a lot more intense, and yeah, it was just really crazy. It's kind of eerie, honestly. But so I noticed something about that debate. It was so much different from the rest of the debates, not just in that sense, but in the topical sense, because the entire topic was basically just the coronavirus the entire time. And I always saw something fishy about that. Um, because if you're good, because you're missing a lot of issues. If you're just going to talk about the coronavirus the entire time, then you have to ignore a bunch of other important issues. So, the coronavirus was heavily emphasized in that debate. And in that debate, Joe Biden was a lot tougher on the coronavirus. Um, he was talking about um, uh, basically how he's going to be the one that turns the coronavirus around, and that he's going to have the government crack down on the coronavirus. And I found that very alarming when I was watching that debate. Now, Bernie Sanders, he had a more different approach, actually. Uh, so his approach was more funding for healthcare, uh, so that hospitals would be able to have more capacity and more funding and resources. Um, but he wasn't actually trying to crack down on the virus that hard. Um, he was mostly just emphasizing on healthcare, like he always does. He has been for um, about 5 years now. And before that, when he was a senator and still is, uh, before he ran for president. So, but because so I'd say one of the reasons why Joe Biden won the Democratic nomination was because he's tougher on the coronavirus. So the coronavirus, ever since March, became an issue that was heavily politicized and, well, resulted in Joe Biden winning the nomination and for his gain. And so another reason why, but yeah, so this brings me to the second reason why Joe Biden won the nomination. It was because the DNC screwed Bernie Sanders over. The DNC noticed how supportive the public was of Bernie Sanders. So the DNC rigged the election purposely so that the nomination would go towards Joe Biden because Joe Biden isn't he's not as tough on businesses, and so Bernie Sanders, as you know, he's a democratic socialist. So in America, that's seen as a radical leftist ideology. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. Democratic
Yeah.
socialism, yeah, democratic socialism is a very moderate ideology, actually. It's not even regular socialism, which even regular socialism, you could argue, is moderate. But regular socialism, uh, it's not even radical. The radical version of it would be communism, but yeah, socialism is fairly moderate. And if you add democratic to that, democratic socialism, you get a very moderate ideology. Um, yeah, do you
Well,
have any thoughts on that?
I often confuse social democracy with democratic socialism because people often comment specifically on Bernie Sanders. Everyone says that he misuses the terms. He calls himself a democratic socialist when he's actually a social democrat, and or maybe it's the opposite. I don't know.
So here's my take on that. So I'd say those terms are essentially interchangeable. Um, I mean, some could point out some differences between the two, but yeah, I'd argue they're essentially interchangeable because democratic socialism is essentially socialism, but with more of a people's control. Um, it emphasizes more on the democratic process and the people controlling the socialism rather than the state having more control of the socialism. As for social democracy, um, well, yeah, I'd argue the terms are really interchangeable because what social democracy implies is more social programs within democracy, which is essentially what democratic socialism is advocating for. Uh, because again, it would be a mix between the two. It'd be a mix between democracy and socialism, because the people would be controlling it uh, through representation, but it would be more. But there'd be a lot more government programs. But yeah, what are your takes on that?
I mean, from what I gather is Sanders is a social democrat. So, and yeah, you said that people often comment as if he's a quote unquote socialist. He's not. He's at most, if we are looking at the political compass, he's at most a centrist, which is basically within the right sides of the political compass. He is a capitalist, which is the closest to center, closest to socialism, which is exactly as you described, a capitalistic system with social policies free healthcare and schools, stuff like that. So yeah, he's very misrepresented in the media.
Well, yes, he is misrepresented in the media. However, I would still say he's a democratic socialist, and I'd say arguably he was a regular socialist in the past. So, as you know, Bernie Sanders has been in politics since the '80s. I'm pretty sure he's been a senator for quite a while now. I think around the '90s, either '90s or late '80s. I think. Um, but I know he's been the. I'm pretty sure he's been the government. I mean, governor of Vermont. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I'm pretty sure he's been the government of Vermont in the '80s. But so he advertised himself as a socialist then, and arguably he had more aggressive socialist policies like more funding to healthcare. So I'd still argue Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist, which I'd say isn't capitalist at all. In fact, he said himself he isn't a capitalist. I'd argue he's still a leftist. Um, in fact, I'd argue he's a leftist authoritarian. Not that much authoritarian, but I'd say if you had to call him an authoritarian or libertarian, I'd say he leans authoritarian barely more, just because he emphasizes how government uh, can be used a lot in uh, as you know, social programs are the government. So, but yeah, that's a bit of a tangent. So, but yeah, Bernie Sanders, uh, but yeah, he doesn't actually embrace capitalism. He actually tries to fight and regulate capitalism, and he's actually been standing up to corporations a lot. And he often attacks the pharmaceutical industry um, a lot. He's mentioned that a lot within the debates, and he even mentioned how ads during the debates are for the pharmaceutical industry. So I always found that fascinating. Um, yeah, it is true. Bernie Sanders. There's been a lot of debate and misrepresentation in the media over his true ideology, but I'd still argue he's a democratic socialist, which again I'd argue can be interchangeable with social democracy. But but yeah, um, yeah, that's yeah. Anyway, um, so yeah, a little bit of interesting discussion there, but this is more about Joe Biden. Um, so as we all know, Joe Biden won the Democratic nomination in March, um, and nobody really saw it coming. Hell, I didn't see it coming. I expected Bernie Sanders to win.
Yeah,
Uh,
me too.
yeah, it was just crazy. It took the whole world by surprise, and yeah, I was really concerned when that happened. Um, and and yeah, again, the DNC screwed over Bernie Sanders because his political ideologies are uh, more left than Joe Biden, and he's more and the media and government view him as a radical, which again we covered how he's not a radical at all.
That's a joke.
Yeah, it's a total joke. The reason why the media and government consider Bernie Sanders to be a radical is because in reality the media and government are the real radicals. They're radical to the right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, America is a far right nation, and the sooner people realize this, is the sooner we're gonna do something about it. But people are still in the illusion that America is a democracy. It really isn't, and and we're gonna touch more on that a little bit later. But um, yeah, Joe Biden. So he won the nomination, and when that happened, I was completely shocked. Uh, yeah, I was basically like, fuck. Trump is gonna win the election now because of this. And luckily I was wrong, but um, but it still heavily concerned me. Uh, because let's face it, Bernie Sanders had a way better chance of beating Trump than Joe Biden did because of all the support he got. Joe Biden, Joe Biden has more money, but he doesn't have more support. That's why the election was so close. And another thing, so Joe Biden is more moderate. In fact, I'd say he's a centrist, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So Joe Biden is a centrist pretending to be a Democrat. He's not actually a Democrat at all.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I
Yeah.
remember watching the first Democratic debate, and I somewhat liked most of the candidates. The one that I liked the least was Joe Biden.
Oh yeah.
The other ones seemed fine to me. Obviously, Bernie Sanders seemed one of the best, and yeah, it's just too much of a coincidence. The one that was least quote unquote left ended up winning the Democratic vote.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember. So I've seen every single Democratic debate, and yeah, Joe Biden is the one I hated the most. Um, so as for me liking any candidates, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't really like any of them. Uh, yeah, their views, like the Democratic Party, this election was pretty fucked overall. Like their views were more uh, authoritarian leaning, I'd say. But I don't hate a lot of them. Like I don't hate Bernie Sanders, but so the one I hated the most, was Mike Bloomberg. But yeah, he was only in two debates, and he wasn't in the race for that long. So fuck him. Let's forget about him. Yeah, other than him, I hated Joe Biden the most. So I flipped off Joe Biden every time I watched one of the debates. Every single debate, I flipped him off because I hate him that much. He's horrible.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and of course I flipped off Mike Bloomberg too. But yeah, Joe Biden was in every single debate, and I flipped him off in every single debate. Well, he wasn't in the either first or second debate because that one was weird. Um, what did they do? Like they did something weird where there were like 20 candidates, and so they put 10 in the first debate and then 10 in the other. So Joe Biden wasn't in one of those for obvious reasons because they had split.
Oh, I see. So I probably only watched the one that didn't have him, because I really didn't even know his name.
Huh. Well,
At least if he
maybe so.
was, he at most he went way under the radar. He was just insignificant in the
Hmm.
debate.
I don't know. You might have seen him. In it was either the first debate or second. I forgot which one, but I remember one of them had Joe Biden in it, and then the other had Bernie Sanders in it. But hmm.
Oh, okay. I watched the one that had Bernie Sanders.
Oh, hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Joe Biden wasn't in that one. I'm pretty sure he was in the other one. So I don't know. But at least you know a bit about Joe Biden. Well, we all do at this point. but yeah. Uh, yeah, Joe Biden. Yeah, of course, he gained a lot of popularity throughout the months of this election, but yeah. So let's see. What was I gonna say next? But yeah. So Joe Biden, he took the world by surprise, and so so I thought he was gonna lose against Trump, because of how moderate he is. Um, because he doesn't really have a stance on anything. Bernie Sanders actually has a stance on something, and uh, and there's been a growing social movement of leftists, um, uh, where it's basically just a movement of leftism in America and overall around the world, but mostly in America, mostly in response to Donald Trump, but also to tackle other issues like climate change and stuff. But yeah, that would have resonated a lot better with Bernie Sanders as the nomination, and he would have won essentially by a landslide. But instead, we had Joe Biden, and so that really shook up the election a lot. So once we get past the point of the Democratic primaries, uh, that's when the president, like the presidential race, really kicked off, where it was Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So this is when things get interesting. Uh, so what was I gonna say? All right, so I'd say it's really no coincidence that the coronavirus lockdown started around the time when Joe Biden won the nomination. Because Joe Biden, he doesn't really have any ground or argument uh, to become president and take on Trump because he's a centrist. He doesn't really have any strong positions on anything. He's wishy washy and weak. And so I pointed this out when he won the nomination, that there's no way he's going to be able to beat Trump, uh, because he had nothing to stand on. And for a while that was true, but only for a short while. And that's so right when he won the nomination, that's when the lockdown started. And Joe Biden, so as soon as he won the nomination, this is where his political strategy shifted a bit. He started to use the coronavirus as a political weapon, and this started to really become more obvious, like I mentioned earlier in the last debate against Bernie Sanders. Uh, but he really started to amp it up when he was against Trump. So, so the lockdown happened from around March through June or July. It's kind of muddy and unclear exactly when the lockdown ended in America, but it was around that time, early summer slash late spring of 2020. Um, so so yeah, that's when Joe Biden started to really get more tough on the coronavirus because it's a very relevant issue. So the coronavirus is the October surprise, except it happened in March instead of October like usual. And another October surprise was Joe Biden winning the nomination. Except that happened in March as well. So, and there's really no coincidence here. The connection between Joe Biden and the coronavirus. This is all being strategically played out. It's all planned here. Uh, and so Joe Biden has been talking about the coronavirus very heavily, very strongly from March through now. and he's been using the coronavirus to gain political power this entire time. Uh, and yeah, that's why the coronavirus quote unquote hit so bad in March, because that was when the primaries were. So, yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I know that. By contrast, I know Trump made promises if he became president. He made very specific promises of what he'd do to the healthcare, which would be basically fuck all and stuff like that. And I know that Biden he really uses the gimmick of the virus. But really, what does he have to offer? What policies or changes does he promise to make?
I'll tell you what he has to offer. Nothing. Joe Biden is, well, he's a very vague centrist. He panders to authoritarians and fascists, and he does this by being so tough on the coronavirus. His main issue is the coronavirus. He doesn't have anything else to offer. Joe Biden is going to be known as the coronavirus president once he gets into office. Um, so, but yeah, he didn't really have any strong ground at all during the debates, and this was blatantly obvious. Yet the media never touched on that. All the media ever did was praise Joe Biden, and they never said why. They just said, "Oh, Bernie Sanders is more radical and Joe Biden's more moderate, so it makes sense why people would go more for Joe Biden." So, um, so yeah, as the coronavirus became a huge issue, yeah, Joe Biden has been using the coronavirus as a political weapon throughout the months, and this became more and more obvious around September and October when the debates against Trump started. So, uh, let's see. Um, let's see. What was I gonna say? Um, so so as the so as election day approached, when it got really close from September and October, on early November, uh, yeah, this is when each campaign really started to campaign harder and more aggressively, and so Trump and Joe Biden had two drastically different campaign strategies. And by the way, so before I get into that, I'm gonna say, so as we mentioned before, Joe Biden is a centrist who panders to authoritarians and fascists, and Trump is a Nazi because he's a fascist. He claimed to have total control and power in March when he enforced the lockdown. And and yeah, he's been doing very fascist policies, and as well, he's a far righter. He's an extremist capitalist, and uh, his social views are very reactionary and conservative, very far to the right. So, so yeah, as you know, if you're a fascist and a far righter, that makes you a Nazi. So, so the public, so the public believes that it's a Democrat versus a Republican like usual, but in reality, it's a centrist versus a Nazi, and so the media is really the media and government are doing their job well. They're deceiving the public. It's really nasty, but it's the truth. Yeah. So anyway, So on to their political strategies, campaign strategies. So, and this becomes a lot more evident in the debates. So, so each campaign held rallies. So Trump's rallies were huge, absolutely huge, and this was his strategy. So Trump is really good at rallying up support. This was very evident in 2016 uh, when he campaigned really hard. His rallies were really rowdy. A lot of people attended, and Trump was basically yelling, roaring to the crowd, saying, "Oh hey guys, you see all these illegal Mexicans and shit? Fuck them. They're all horrible. They're all rapists. We need to ban Muslims. We need to build a wall." Stuff like that. So he relied on gimmicks, catchphrases, and just overall outlandish, just outrageous, just overall behavior. Trump was very obnoxious, and this is a part of his strategy, and it's still a part of his strategy in 2020. Um, and and that's very reflected on his rallies. His rallies were huge, and like in 2020, his rallies were huge. A lot of people came. They were obnoxious. They were loud. They were rowdy. Like it's, I've never been to one of those rallies because fuck that. But yeah, if you watch them, it's essentially like watching a football game. Because the crowd is roaring, and yeah, Trump is just loud, and it just gets crazy, and yeah, Trump just makes outlandish, just statements and policy declarations, and he just says the craziest stuff. So Joe Biden also had rallies, but here's the thing about the rallies: almost no one came to those, and the reason why. So this is the downside of using the coronavirus as a political weapon. If you want to intentionally scare the public about the coronavirus, and if you want them to be in fear again over the coronavirus, well, that's gonna backfire on you once you have the rallies because no one's gonna show up, and yeah, that's the reality here. Uh, Barely anyone showed up to those rallies. Uh, so Joe Biden he still gained a lot of let's just call it silent support um, due to fear over the coronavirus. But the problem is that support isn't visible in the rallies because no one showed up. Um, so what Trump is relying on is a rowdy crowd, um, basically where everything's crazy. That's how he gets his supporters, by attracting basically just a bunch of just rowdy people. Um, and Joe Biden's strategy is fear. He wants people to be afraid of the coronavirus so they'll join his side, because they think he'll be able to do something about it. Um, so yeah, any takes on that?
I mean, not really, I guess.
All right. So this becomes more obvious come the debates. So there were two debates, two presidential debates, and one vice presidential debate. We're not really going to talk about the vice presidential debate too much, but we're going to talk about the debates. So the first debate was in September. I'm pretty sure the 30th of September. And so this is where their campaign strategies became a lot more obvious. Uh, so so Trump, so in the debate, his strategy was essentially just be rowdy, gimmicky, obnoxious, um, loud, and uh, and basically attack Joe Biden personally, make him look bad, make him look incompetent, and so yeah, his strategy was to be as loud and talkative, dominant as possible to make Joe Biden look weak in comparison, so he can get the votes. And and Joe Biden's strategy contrasted heavily in comparison to this, uh, where Joe Biden's strategy was, as you know, like I mentioned earlier, getting the public to be afraid of the coronavirus. Yeah, using fear for his benefit. He was basically saying that the virus is getting worse and worse, and he was subliminally telling everyone to support him if they want to be protected from the coronavirus, which of course I'd say is not possible, but you know that's his strategy still. Um, so uh, so yeah, Joe Biden didn't really have any other strong issues to stand on. It was mainly just the coronavirus and using fear to get people to join his side. So the way this turned out in the debate was just a total disaster, really. Uh, so there was constant interrupting, mostly by Trump. Trump was talking over Joe Biden basically the entire time, and even over the moderator for about 3 minutes straight. So, so I remember I was over at a friend's house. Uh, my alt right friend's house. And our fascist friend came over, and they were saying that Trump interrupting the moderator and Joe Biden at the same time was historic. But the truth is, it really wasn't. I mean, it was historic in a bad way, but they were implying that it would secure Trump's win, but it didn't. So, so what it really led to in American history was, well, essentially the most chaotic presidential debate in history. I really can't name one presidential debate that was more chaotic than that. They kept talking over each other. Mostly Trump was talking over Joe Biden. Uh, and again, over the moderator. And not a lot of words really got in. It was mostly just a lot of insults. Trump was attacking Joe Biden and his family. He was even attacking his son, both of his sons, I think. One of his sons for like being a drug addict or something, which is completely irrelevant to the issues entirely. So it's really a dirty move. It's a fucked up move,
Yeah, it's the
especially.
typical poisoning of the well.
Yeah, exactly. They're so so they're using just cheap gimmicky attacks, and this is a terrible way to debate. Um, so that's why I'd argue the first debate wasn't really even a debate. I'd say it was more of an argument, and it was very chaotic. Um, and yeah, it was just a huge shit show. And even Joe Biden, under the pressure, he even insulted Trump in response, and he was like, "Ah, will you shut up, man?" and shit like that. Yeah, it was overall crazy, but yeah, yeah, that debate was fucked. Honestly, I'd say that was probably the worst debate I've ever seen in my life. It was entertaining. It was funny. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, you know, this is the future of America and the future of the world. So I was really concerned when I was watching it, and so was basically everyone else who was watching it. Um, and so, uh, let's see. So um, so the so there were supposed to be three debates. Um, uh, and well, as you know, there weren't. There's supposed to be a second debate between Trump and Joe Biden, but that's when Trump got the coronavirus. So so basically, the people that were organizing the debate were like, "Oh yeah, we're not having this in person because Trump is infected." Uh, so, but Trump insisted that he wanted to debate, but when they offered an online debate as an alternative, Trump said no, which doesn't make any sense. Yeah, if you want to debate so bad, um, and you're given an opportunity to debate, but you reject that, that's completely contradictory. I mean, don't get me wrong, an online presidential debate does sound a bit strange, but it's really better than nothing. So uh, Trump honestly kind of fucked himself over by refusing that opportunity because Joe Biden wasn't objected to this opportunity, and as a result, that went to his advantage. And Trump having the coronavirus, that was also a disadvantage for him, considering that Joe Biden's political strategy is essentially the coronavirus. Uh, so yeah, but yeah. So instead of that, there was two town halls. I didn't watch those, but I heard they were basically just attacking each other. But yeah, it's not really that significant. But at around that time, there was a vice presidential debate, and that one was kind of interesting. So that one was between Vice President Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, who was a who formerly ran in the Democratic uh, race, uh, but she didn't qualify. Uh, so Joe Biden, as you know, chose her to be his running mate. So I kind of find that interesting because um, she was a candidate running against him. Now she's on his team, so I find that a bit fascinating. Um, but yeah. So anyway, they debated. I don't know if you saw that debate or not. So which debates did you see, by the way?
I mean, I saw a portion of that Harris debate, not the entire thing.
Oh, okay. So, so that debate was a bit more interesting because they actually communicated with each other. Um, so Mike Pence elaborated more on Trump's points and Trump's defenses. Uh, Same with Kamala Harris. And and it was moderated, I'd say, a little better because there was certainly no interrupting. Uh, but I mean, it's kind of expected uh, since I mean it's Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. They don't exactly scream at each other. So it was a bit more of an interesting debate to watch. I'd say it's definitely better than the first presidential debate. Um, but I noticed a significant problem with those debates. So, uh, so let's see. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So they kept attacking. Uh, so they kept going back on the points that they were supposed to address earlier. Let me rephrase that. So they were asked a question, and they kept talking about the last question, the previous question, which completely muddied the responses to the actual question. So it basically just confused everyone. So that was also a chaotic debate in that sense. But yeah, anyway, that was a vice presidential debate, so we don't really need to touch on that too much. But I just found that interesting. But yeah, it was still a good debate. Yeah. Anyway, so the third debate, or really should I say the second debate, was in late October which was Joe Biden versus Donald Trump again. So it was another in person one. Uh, so this debate was a lot more interesting. It was moderated a lot better. They both each had about equal speaking time, uh, and their positions were a lot more clear. However, it was still a shit show. It was less chaotic, but it was still a shit show for sure. Um, Donald Trump still attacked Joe Biden's family, of course, and Joe Biden kept using the coronavirus as a political weapon. So I noticed that around this time, October. So I predicted this actually. The media and the government were really going to start panicking about a second wave. And they were really panicking about a second wave in Europe a lot. And they even did that in America a lot. And I was right about that. And Joe Biden really emphasized this in the debate. He even said that there would be a dark winter up ahead. And that was a really just eerie, spine chilling statement. And he kept saying that throughout the debate. And yeah, that really made a lot of people terrified. And this was emphasized in the media a lot. This made a lot of people terrified of the coronavirus. Hence, why Joe Biden has gotten a lot of support. Because people are fucking terrified over the coronavirus and they want someone to save them from it. And they believe that savior will be Joe Biden. Even though, well, he's not a savior. Joe Biden is using the coronavirus as a political weapon. And so I find this funny. Joe Biden even brought this up a little bit in the debates. He said that the virus shouldn't be politicized. I find it hilarious how the people who say it shouldn't be politicized are the ones that are politicizing the coronavirus.
Yeah, it's very hypocritical.
It's very hypocritical. And and Joe Biden's definitely a huge mask guy. He's also using masks as a political statement. Uh, so he's telling his supporters to mask up and telling everyone to mask up. Uh, so masks are essentially a symbol of Joe Biden. Uh, because a lot of Joe Biden supporters wear masks, and a lot of Trump supporters don't wear masks. I'm not saying Trump isn't pro-mask, but he's certainly a lot less pro-mask than Joe Biden is. So Joe Biden, uh, yeah, he's been using masks for his advantage for political power. He's using it essentially as a symbol, as a gimmick. And yeah, this really helped him gain a lot of momentum. Let's see. Oh yeah, so another thing. Uh, so this is another big thing. Another part of Trump's strategy. So he's been doing this for months before the actual election occurred. He's been claiming that voter fraud is a problem, and he's had no
Mhm.
evidence to back himself up with. And he's been saying this for months, even before the election. That's a really strange thing for a president to do. I mean, for a candidate to do. And the reason why is because he knows he's going to lose. And as a result, he lost. I mean, not as a result, but he lost. Um, and yeah, voter fraud. So yeah, he's been talking about voter fraud a lot, and and he's subliminally putting that into his supporters' heads, uh, trying to convince them that this election has been stolen from Trump. And he's been saying this, yeah, um, before the election. before the election happened. So yeah. What was I gonna say? But yeah, so Trump has been crying voter fraud for a while, even before the election. Uh, let's see, and let's see, yeah, and of course this happened by the time the election came. So let's jump to November 3rd, uh, election day. So, or should I say the start of election day, or should I say election weeks? Because this election has been going on for a while. So once the election actually came, there were 5 days.
No, I'm very interested in talking about the voter fraud conspiracy. I have an article open, and so yeah.
Oh, wait, okay, for sure, for sure. All right, um, we move to when the election actually happened. Well, I mean, it's still happening. So, what was I going to say? Uh, all right, so as we all know, there were 5 days of what I called a state of limbo. We basically didn't know who won the presidency for 5 days because all the votes were being counted. Uh, but yeah. Um, and this of a lot of people, especially Democrats, decided to vote by mail this election, mainly because of the coronavirus. I mean, voting by mail isn't an unusual thing, but as we know, there was definitely more of a trend in that. But yeah, anyway, so that's what resulted in the 5 day limbo. And the 5 day limbo, oh man, let's just say you do not, because that sparked something we haven't really seen that much of in the history before. Uh, so there were a lot of protests and riots during this presidential limbo. Uh, and uh, and yeah, everyone saw this coming. Well, not everyone. Actually, most people didn't see this coming, but a lot of people did see this coming. I certainly saw this coming. I knew this was coming for months before this. Um, but yeah, so I didn't think the protests and riots were gonna happen until after the election was called. Well, I thought they'd happen. Actually, no, never mind. I remember. I actually did think that they would happen on November 3rd, which they did. Uh, yeah, I predicted riots and protests happening on November 3rd, and they did, and a lot of people have been predicting it as well. So, So let's talk about the protests and riots for a bit. So there were a significant amount that happened on the day on November 3rd through the 6th. Um, uh, yeah, during this limbo. So these protests included the so the first one I noticed was the count all the votes protest. So that was a pro democracy protest, where people were saying, "Hey, every vote counts. Please count all the votes. And let's go through this smoothly. Just don't fuck us over, and we should be fine." So that protest was, I'd say, probably the most peaceful of them all. People were just marching through the street, just calmly demanding all the votes be counted. Um, but here's something that happened after that that I find interesting. That kind of led to Black Lives Matter protests. So they took it. So after a while, they took that a step further, and some Black Lives Matter protests occurred shortly after that, and they were still peaceful. They weren't violent at all, but they were definitely a lot more demanding. People were more shouting about it. People were more passionate about it, and yeah, they were demanding rights for black people, which I'd say is a great thing. Um, but then here's when things started to get a bit more interesting. After that, there were some anti-Trump protests. After that, that's when things started to get more intense. Uh, Most of these anti-Trump protests were in D.C. actually, but they were all around really. Uh, this is when things started to get a bit more heated. There were uh, very heated, just anti-Trump, just statements and just overall a bunch of angry people that absolutely wanted Trump out of office. Um, and this is where things get really heated. So there was actually so there were actually some riots too. There was a Portland there was a riot in Portland, and it was essentially an anti-government slash anti-America slash anti-Trump riot. There were a lot of American flags being burnt. There was a little bit of violence. There was some police clashing. Um, and I'm pretty sure the military was even brought out as well. Either the military or the National Guard, but the National Guard's part of the military, so yeah. But yeah, that got pretty fucking crazy, and I think it turned a bit violent as well. But yeah, there was an anti-Trump. I mean, yeah, an anti-Trump slash anti-government slash anti America riot in Portland, and yeah, it got pretty crazy during this election limbo. There was also so there were actually riots and protests from the right as well during this limbo. There was there were stop the vote riots and protests, mainly in Arizona actually. So there were people lining up outside of the I keep forgetting what they're called. So just for simplicity's sake, I'll just call them voting places. So voting places, where people were just basically gathering around, saying, just demanding them to stop counting the votes. And so the reason why they were doing that is because Trump told them to. Trump was demanding to stop counting the votes, which is very alarming for a few reasons. Because Trump thinks this is going to make him win. He thinks it's going to make him win because if he stops some states from counting the votes, then other states that count his votes will have him win. Uh, I mean, yeah, other states that are counting his votes will have him win. So, uh, but what was I gonna say? That's not the case. If you stop counting the votes, Joe Biden would still have won because Joe Biden was leading. That's around the time when uh, Trump was saying stop counting the votes, when the public was finding out that Joe Biden was winning. So the right and Trump was really freaking out about this, and Trump was essentially telling his supporters to go out and protest and riot to stop counting the votes. And so the protests and riots got pretty crazy. The people started yelling, started just being really hateful to the people counting the votes. Uh, and they were even some of the people even went in and started banging on the walls. I mean, banging on the windows uh, of of the people counting the votes. So it was an angry mob demanding that the votes stop being counted. So this is very dangerous. This is very undemocratic because it stops the people's voices from being heard. Because it literally stops the vote. They're literally demanding that voting stops. You can't do that. No one does that but fascists. If you demand that votes stop being counted, then you're a fascist. There's no argument about that. But
Yeah, and what's really super hypocritical was at the exact same time, in some states where Trump was winning, they were doing the chant of "Stop the votes! Stop the votes!" And in other states where Trump was losing, they were chanting the exact opposite. They were chanting, "Count the votes! Count the votes!" So it's not even consistent. It's just, please just make Trump president, because who cares about democracy? Who cares?
oh yeah,
It's
exactly.
just
So, but yeah, this is really fascinating because yeah, I forgot to mention. So I was actually about to talk about the recount protests as well. So there were both stop the vote riots and protests and recount protests and riots. So yeah, that is true. It's not consistent at all. Uh, and Trump was demanding both of these things. That's the only right reason why these riots and protests happened, was because Trump was telling them to. So Trump was inciting riots, anti-democratic fascist riots. Uh, um, yeah, which is, by the way, what the right claims to not do. The right claims to be very anti-riot and was very against the riots and protests that happened during the Black Lives Matter movement throughout late spring and summer of 2020. But yeah, it was really bad because there were recount protests and stop the vote protests and riots, and yeah, they're contradictory. So what do you want? Do you want to recount the votes or do you want to stop the votes? Because those are essentially the opposite. You're essentially demanding for more counting, but at the same time, no counting. So which one do you want? Uh, and the answer is they don't want either. They just want Trump in office. That's the only reason why they did that. So they're very undemocratic and obviously heavily biased. They might as well just say Trump needs to be the president. It doesn't matter. The voting process doesn't matter. Just Trump needs to be president no matter what. Uh, so yeah, of course it's very undemocratic and obviously controlled and incited by Trump. So yeah, this is very very dangerous and yeah. Uh, so but yeah, any other thoughts about that?
No, I would like to talk about the lawsuit, which I also find interesting
Oh yeah,
regarding
that's
the
right.
votes.
So 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 yeah, let's talk about the lawsuit, but just really quick before the lawsuit, I think we should talk about how uh after these protests in presidential limbo, uh so Joe Biden won the presidential election. He became the president elect on November 7th, 2020. Um, oh wait, also I forgot to mention one other thing before that. So Alex Jones actually went to uh, these limbo protests, these stop the vote protests, and he was basically inciting violence. And yeah, violence happened on both sides during these limbo protests. And Alex Jones was inciting violence, was inciting that they invade um, the voting counting places to force them to stop counting the votes. So yeah, that's extremely dangerous. So they're basically forcing democracy to halt completely. Uh, I mean, I'm not saying America is a democracy, but I'm saying the closest to what is a democratic process. You know what I mean? But yeah, Alex Jones incited that. So you can essentially call these people the black shirts and brown shirts of Trump because they were controlled by Trump. But yeah. Anyway, so let's go into the result of the election, where, as you know, Joe Biden won. The He won the presidential race. He's been declared the president elect, and so um, let's see. Um, let's see. What was I going to say? So so at this point, the protests continued, but only from the right, and there were protests and riots, not just protests. But so I'm gonna say this part is post-presidential limbo. So this is so on Saturday, November 7th of 2020. This is what happened. So the left, when they found out Joe Biden won, they went out in the streets and partied. They celebrated that Joe Biden won the uh, election. And so, yeah, there were no problems from that, just partying and stuff. Nothing harmful about that. Um, but on the right, uh, what happened as a result was basically Trump supporters losing their shit and rioting and protesting like a fuck ton. This is when the protests and riots got taken up a notch. So some significant protests that occurred uh, from this were protests in D.C. Um, there was a huge, and I mean huge, pro-Trump riot and protest that happened. There was marching in the streets. There were people demanding that Trump is the president. They were saying 4 more years. They were saying recount the votes. They were saying stop the votes, stop the steal. Um, and yeah, there were people marching in the streets. There were people just overall being crazy, starting fights, just yelling a lot. Just there was a lot of violence that occurred. Um, yeah, overall it was just chaos. And these people just wanted Trump in office. They were, and yeah, It was ridiculous. And so more of these happened in California. So there were California pro-Trump riots and protests. Uh, and the riots and protests in California were even crazier than the DC ones. Uh, so so what happened here was what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so they were in the streets marching really loudly. There was a lot of chanting. There was a lot of just yelling. There was a lot of destruction, actually. The right started getting angry and destroying stuff, lighting off fireworks, starting fights, um, and they even turned into mob fights where basically they're saying, "Oh, get that person," and then the mob would attack just one person. A lot of people got hurt. I think some people even got arrested. Um, and Yeah, overall it was really crazy. And they were even chanting stuff like 4 more years, stop the vote. And they were saying stuff like say his name, Donald Trump, where so in the riots and protests of late spring slash summer 2020 for Black Lives Matter, so when they say his name, it's supposed to be for George Floyd. But what the right did was essentially copy that and instead say his name, Donald Trump, like he's some sort of a victim. But fuck no, he's not a victim. Donald Trump is a tyrant. And they're trying to victimize Donald Trump to get support for their side. So what the right is doing is playing the victim, uh, which is what the right claimed about the left a lot in 2016. So So here's something ironic about the right. They're heavily in support of Donald Trump, and they were accusing a lot of leftists in 2016 of being liberals and snowflakes and shit. When Hillary Clinton lost the election in 2016. But here's the thing: the right is actually the real snowflakes and triggered people. They're the real snowflakes. They're the ones playing the victim. Uh, and they're also going against our stance on rioting. So the right was very anti-riot and anti-protest uh, in spring and summer of 2020 when the Black Lives Matter movement uh, really started to gain a lot of ground. Uh, so so the right has taken a stance against rioting and protesting, yet that's what they're doing in these post-limbo protests uh, and riots. So the right is completely hypocritical um, because they're now a bunch of whiny snowflakes complaining that their guy lost. They're playing the victim, and they're rioting and protesting and causing a bunch of destruction and chaos. And they're not peaceful. This isn't peaceful at all, by the way. Um, yeah, they're being completely hypocritical. And also another thing, in these protests and riots, there's a huge presence of the Proud Boys, the Nazis, and the alt-right. So So here's the thing about the Proud Boys. So in one of the debates, I think it was the first one, so there was a question basically saying if Trump is willing to denounce white supremacy and the Proud Boys. And Trump said, stand down. So he didn't denounce them. He said, just wait until the time is right. It's a dog whistle. And, well, Trump basically said, Trump was basically subliminally saying, hey, if I lose, riot now. Fuck shit up. Um, Make me win. Make people scared. Overthrow the democratic process. And so that's what's happening right now. So Trump subliminally put a message into the Proud Boys' heads saying, "Hey, since I lost, you have to fight for me now." So the Proud Boys are essentially Trump's brown shirts and black shirts. Because here's the thing about the Proud Boys: they're Nazis. Proud Boys are fucking Nazis. They're a far right white supremacist, male supremacist group. Um, they're extremely authoritarian. They're fascist and they're extremely reactionary and far right culturally and economically. So they are Nazis, and this makes sense that Proud Boys would support Trump and that they're Nazis because Trump is a Nazi himself. So all this is a huge Nazi movement. It's not just a movement for conservatives. It's a movement for Nazis and fascists as well, which is how dangerous the right has gotten at this point. So yeah, it's extremely concerning. Here's here's something that the Proud Boys have been doing. They've been starting a lot of fights. They've been saying, "Hey, look, it's Antifa," uh, and they were inciting violence and gang ups on anti-fascist people um, for counter protesting. And yeah, by the way, Antifa. There were Antifa counter protests um, in reaction to some of these protests and riots, which I mean, I support them, but I'd say at the same time, I don't think it's a good time to do that because Joe Biden won, so I don't think the left really has anything to protest for at the moment. I'd say it's really just adding fuel to the fire and having the media justify the right. So I don't think it's a good move at the moment yet. But here's what happened. So the Proud Boys, so they attacked anti-fascist people for counter protesting. Uh, and yeah, they were starting fights, they were starting violence, and they were instigating this. The Proud Boys and well, which they're Nazis, so the Nazis did this. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I'm not informed about the whatever boys.
Oh, okay. But yeah, the Proud Boys. So yeah, I just explained. So they're basically a Nazi group. They're a hate group. They're a white supremacist group. They're a male supremacist group. They're all that. They're basically Nazis. But here's the thing: they pretend to not be Nazis. Uh, they claim to not be racist. They claim to not be Nazis. But that couldn't be further from the truth because they are. Uh, and I just explained why. So here's another thing about the Proud Boys. So they have a weird uniform. It's like a black and yellow weird collar shirt. And what they do is and they have these weird initiations to get in, and you basically have to fight people to get in. Uh, you have to start a bunch of fights and yeah, basically commit acts of violence to get in, and they have weird initiations revolving around breakfast cereals, which all this is really strange. So the Proud Boys are they're Nazis, but really boring. They're really boring at being Nazis. They're just they're the new way that the Nazis look. They have a new look for the Nazis. And I'm going to go further than that. So I'd argue that the Proud Boys are uh, a violent Nazi terrorist cult. And yeah, let that sink in for a bit. Because they are a cult. They have weird initiations and rituals to get in. They incite violence, and it's a group mentality of them thinking a certain way. So it's a huge So I'd say it's really a huge terrorist cult because that's what it is. They incite violence and they commit acts of violence, and they all think a certain way in a group for political support. So yeah, so I'd say the Proud Boys are extremely dangerous, and well, we should really be against them because they're Nazi pieces of shit. But yeah, yeah, just a little that about the Proud Boys. So yeah, these protests have been fucking wild. It's just been a real shit show. So um, but yeah, let's move on a bit. Uh, so yeah, those protests and stuff have been happening and riots. But and so meanwhile, uh, so Trump has been refusing to concede power. He's been refusing to hand the race over to Joe Biden. So we all know that Joe Biden won. But here's the dangerous thing. Trump is refusing to concede. This has never been done in history. This is very dangerous. Uh so yeah, Trump is refusing to lose. Let's see. What do you have to say about what do I have to say about that? Yeah. Um so yeah, usually usually what a president does at around this time when they find out they lost, or just a candidate, not necessarily the president, but a candidate that lost at around this point, they concede the race and they give up and they hand the race over to the winning candidate. But this is the first time this hasn't been done. Trump is not conceding. This is very dangerous and undemocratic. It means Trump is refusing to leave the White House, which is really dangerous, and he's still trying to fight uh, to secure his power. And so he has a process of doing this, and currently he's in his second phase. But yeah, he's going through multiple phases to try to secure his power. So what his first phase was, first phase was filing a bunch of lawsuits. He's suing states on the claim of voter fraud, which you brought up earlier. You said you had an article brought up, right?
Yes, yes.
All right, so yeah, let's talk about voter fraud. So Trump has been claiming voter fraud for months, even before the election actually went in. So this is very strange. It's almost like he predicted himself losing, and that this was his backup. So, uh, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I must interrupt. It's getting a bit too late for me. I can be up for 15 minutes most.
Oh, okay.
We should get maybe to the more current events regarding the.
Oh yeah,
I don't know whatever.
Oh
we
yeah,
want to
don't
talk
worry.
about.
Here's the thing. I'd say this has been going quite smoothly so far. We're actually close. We're actually kind of close to the end of this. Um, but yeah, yeah, we're actually really close to the present at this point. But yeah, anyway, so let's. But yeah, this isn't going to be too much longer. So anyway, let's move on. So, do you want to talk about? So yeah, let's talk about voter fraud for a minute. Would you like to talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, so I watched a couple of videos talking about the voter fraud, which,
All right.
as we all know, it's all bullshit.
True, absolutely.
So there are a few videos on YouTube. This is interesting. With the initial trials in courts, online courts, like it's interesting seeing judges and lawyers in a Zoom meeting just for the initial proceedings.
Yeah, true.
And obviously, the judges always asked for evidence, and there is none. There's just hearsay of hearsay, which is non-evidence. It's not even. It's just speculation. That's all. Just I think it's fraud because I think it's fraud. That's all they have.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, that's all that's going on. It's just, and there are many videos of frustrated judges on YouTube. Some of them are interesting. So yeah, I have an article here. This is from Chicago Tribune. This is the really current events. This is from yesterday. No, this is from the 20th of November.
All right. So
So
that's
let me
yesterday.
just read one of the paragraphs. So this is really current stuff in Pennsylvania,
All right. Nice.
and I'm gonna quote.
All right.
Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, signed onto the case this week after others abruptly withdrew, and the former New York City mayor argued in court on Tuesday for the first time since the 1990s. Giuliani made wild, unsupported allegations of a nationwide conspiracy by Democrats to steal the election. The judge did not immediately issue a ruling and canceled a hearing that was set for Thursday, but set out a schedule for both sides to make new filings this week. So, yeah, this is basically Trump making courts seem like a circus. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
It's going on
essentially.
in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, and Georgia. Oh, and Arizona. These are the major cases with trials.
Oh yeah, for sure. Trump has been focusing his lawsuits on key battleground states. Um, so yeah, he's gone to court basically. Yeah, like you said. Thank you for bringing that up, by the way. Um, uh, but yeah, Trump. He's been essentially claiming voter fraud. Uh, without any evidence. So yeah, the courts basically they don't really take that seriously. So essentially these are conspiracy theories. Uh, the president is making conspiracy theories, which is highly unusual. Because presidents never do this. Usually, when the government talks about conspiracy theories, they talk about um, just random people on the internet making conspiracy theories. Yet it's Trump who's now the one making conspiracy theories. It's all been turned around, and the reason why is because he's panicking. He's doing whatever he can to secure his power, and yeah, that's his first phase. Um, yeah, his first phase is claiming voter fraud and suing states on that claim, which yeah isn't going through because the courts aren't taking this seriously. So that brings me to his second phase. And this is very new. This is I'd say probably days old at this point. So let's see. Um, so now what he's doing, he's changing his strategies. He's trying to uh, flip certain states' results, and I shit you not, he's trying to just flip their results. The first state he's going for is Michigan. Uh, So he's essentially so it hasn't officially been called in Michigan, but we all know that Joe Biden won Michigan. So what Trump is trying to do is just flip Michigan so that it supports him. And really, he doesn't really have a way of going about doing this. I mean, he's trying to get some people legally involved in this, but it's not really going to work. It just isn't. There's really no way Trump can expect this to happen. Uh, so they're essentially trying to influence electors and influence the call. They're just literally all they're trying to do is just have that state be called red, which is again based off of nothing. There's no reason why it should be flipped red. But I will say uh, there has been one anti flipping protest in Michigan. Now this protest was pretty small, and um, it was at an airport. I think this was about 1 or 2 days ago. Um, but yeah, so it's actually Saturday, not Sunday. Sorry, this was filmed a bit earlier, but it was for certain reasons. But yeah, anyway, so this is filmed Saturday, but posted on Sunday. But so anyway, this is about 1 or 2 days ago. From now. So it was an anti-flipping protest. Only a few people showed up. They were basically saying "shame on you," stuff like that. Yeah, it wasn't that big. So I'm just gonna lightly brush on that. Um, so anyway, so um, so let's talk about So here's another interesting thing. Well, not too interesting, but well, let's talk about the House and Senate races. Uh, and we don't need to talk about this for this long because we already mentioned basically all that needs to be known. So the House was taken by the Democrats. The Democrats have a majority in the House, but the Senate still hasn't been called yet. Uh, So it's 50 to 49. The Republicans are leading. They only need one more seat to gain a majority. Um, that's basically it. There's not really too much more you can say about that. But yeah, any takes on that?
Nope.
All right. But yeah, that's really all I had to say about that. It's just interesting. It just still hasn't been called. So there. So here's something interesting that happened today. So currently it is Saturday, November 21st, 2020. So we're really getting into the present now. So uh so today there was and I'm pretty sure it's still going on. Uh so today Georgia it was either today or yesterday. Georgia has officially said that Joe Biden won that state officially by the government. And there has been protest in response to that. It's a huge pro-Trump protest in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, that happened today. That I think is still going on at the moment, actually. So I think that's interesting. So far, it doesn't seem to be too violent. I'd say it's mostly a peaceful protest. So I'd say it's good in that sense. I mean, I still think it's a bad protest because it's very undemocratic and it's in support of a Nazi. But but yeah, but it really just shows that the right seems to sort of be calming down. They sort of like the protests and riots finally seem to be more calming down, and uh, and they seem to kind of be giving up. I'd say. So, do you have any thoughts on that? Have you heard about that protest today?
No, I haven't heard about it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so so yeah. Uh so yeah, that's just something interesting that happened today. So, I want to talk about something else. So currently we're in what's called the lame duck period. And I think that's a bit of a strange term. So it's basically the period in between transition of power, in between Donald Trump being the president and Joe Biden being the president. And this period lasts from November to January 20th. when inauguration day will happen with Joe Biden. So I kind of want to talk about the pros and cons of this lame duck period. So, um, so I'd say it definitely has some pros and cons. So the pros about the lame duck period are, of course, the transition of power. So the reason why the transition of power is more of a safe bet is because of scenarios like this, where in case a president refuses to concede power, if there was no lame duck period, then shit would immediately hit the fan. Uh, Trump would, the panic would be even more strong, and a lot more violence could break out as a result. And Trump could use the military and police to immediately secure his power. So what the lame duck period does is give about a few months for the losing candidate to accept that they lost and hand over the power to the winning candidate. So I'd say that's a pro for that. Um, let's see, are there any other pros? I think that's about it, really. How about you? Do you have any other pros to add?
No, not really.
All right. So here's a con about the lame duck period. Well, because this gives Trump more time to secure his power. Uh, Trump is currently going through legal battles now to secure his power, simply because he has the time to do so. And he's been doing this through lawsuits, and now he's attempting to flip states. So, yeah, this is very dangerous. And this also gives him more time to come up with other strategies. Um, so I'd say that's a con for that. Another con would be uh, basically that the system moves really slowly, um, and that change can't happen that fast. So, so it's essentially slowing down progress, and that's what the lame duck period does. And yeah, it's a huge period, and it basically and yeah, it reflects how just slow the system really is. Um, so so yeah. Um, so so that begs the question. Um, oh yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that, by the way?
No, no.
All right. So let's see. So yeah, Trump still has time to secure his power. So that begs the question: can Donald Trump still hold on to his power? Um, and so the answer I'd say to that would be, well, not likely, but it's possible. And there's a few ways he can do this. I don't want to give him ideas or anything, but I will say that people need to know this just in case. People need to keep their guard up. It's not quite safe yet. So here's the thing. There are still things Trump can do to secure his power. Again, he can still try to flip states. I think soon he'll realize that's not exactly possible. But he can still refuse to concede. So there's nothing in the Constitution stating that a losing candidate has to concede power, which is very alarming. Uh, and yeah, and that's what Donald Trump hasn't been doing. He's been refusing to concede power. He's been refusing to give up his power, and he can do this all the way up to inauguration day on January 20th. And I'm not saying this will happen. It's most likely not to happen. Um, but what Trump can do is actually get the military and police involved to force him into power still, and uh, and so he can overthrow Congress, and he can overthrow the Supreme Court with firepower. He can force himself into power. And the military and the police, they'd essentially be on his side because the military and police tends to support Trump. Uh, so I do think this is pretty alarming, but it hasn't happened yet. But I'm just saying it could happen. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Here's the thing, though. The moment a person stops being president, they lose the, what is it called? Diplomatic immunity? Is it?
I think so.
And the moment that happens, he doesn't have to concede. So it's not a matter of we must wait for him to concede. It doesn't matter at all. People will just replace him. It would need to be a really big conspiracy for everyone to get involved and join Trump's side.
Well, yeah, that is
I
true.
can't imagine. I don't know. It's very far-fetched.
Yeah, that is true. That's why
Not
I'm
very
saying.
likely.
That's why I'm saying this isn't a likely possibility. I do think.
Yeah, and one
If
thing
it
is,
were to. Oh, wait, what were you saying?
one thing that has happened multiple times in multiple countries is when president is being too much of a tyrant and they abuse their power too much, and by the time their presidency ends, they are immediately arrested and go to jail and stuff like that because it's just over. They don't need to concede. That concept of conceding is preposterous. You can't expect this. Oh my God, Trump isn't going to concede and he's going to use the military. No, it's just preposterous.
So,
Saying
well,
it's not 100% impossible, but it's just really far-fetched.
well, yeah, I agree. So I do think that, yeah, it's not very likely because the military and police are currently trying to accept that Joe Biden will be the new president and are getting ready to transition. So they probably won't even take his side. But I'm just saying it's a possibility because of all the support the military and police have for Trump. So yeah, I'm just saying this is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous and real possibility. But yeah, it's not likely. If it were to get to that point, uh, I'd say what's likely to happen is uh, well, Trump would be directly pulled out of office, kicking and screaming, saying, "No, I'm still the president." Shit like that. Um, and yeah, he would basically be directly thrown out. And I think that's I think that's a possibility that could happen. But yeah, I'd say that's definitely way more likely than a complete Trump military and police takeover. I'm just saying, in case that does happen, be ready, guys. Um, but yeah, stay on your guard, guys, in case something like that does happen, because that would be essentially the end of the world. Um, because Trump would use that military and police power to secure his power for the rest of his life and take over the world. But we most likely don't have to be concerned about that, so I'm not going to touch on that too much. But I will say that if Trump did win this, and if Trump did did secure his power past January, he would essentially take over the world and end the world via nuclear war. But yeah, luckily we most likely don't have to worry about that. But yeah, do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think that's a topic for a different time.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we can. Yeah, maybe we can talk about this more in a different video because it's not really. it's not exactly related to the election because Trump lost the election, but I just wanted to just briefly touch on that for a sec. But let's see. So I will say one more thing about the protests. Let's see. Um, actually, I think I said
Here's
everything.
the thing:
Yeah.
we should really wrap
Oh,
this up.
oh yeah.
This
Don't
is
worry. This
getting a
is don't
bit
worry. This
long
is
for
almost
me,
over.
so
This is almost over.
unless you want to say something really quick.
All right. So I think I did say everything I need to say about the protests, but um, let's see. So there is one more thing I wanted to say. Um, so since Joe Biden won and Donald Trump lost, what will a future look like with Joe Biden as president? So what would you say? Uh, do you have any thoughts on that?
Nope.
All right. So here's what I'd have to say. So Joe Biden. So as much as so I hate Donald Trump. I really do. I hate everything Trump stands for, and I'm very against him. And I'm glad Joe Biden won. But at the same time, I do hate Joe Biden. Uh, I do still think Joe Biden will be a very dangerous president. I do think he'll possibly be uh, fascist and authoritarian. I mean, I'd say he's a centrist, but I'd say it's possible that he could be an authoritarian or a fascist. But um, but yeah, we'll just have to see. I know that he will still be using the coronavirus as a political weapon, which so so this is a bit of another topic, but it still has a little bit to do with the election. So the coronavirus, I noticed that ever since, and I'm only going to touch on this briefly, but I noticed that ever since the election ended, the media stopped talking about the coronavirus so much. I mean, they're still talking about it, but not nearly as much. I used to see videos of the top news every single day. All of them would be of the coronavirus, but now only usually 1 in 4 of those are coronavirus related. So the coronavirus is being talked about a lot less lately due to the election and due to the media and government focusing on more other things. So I think that only proves that the coronavirus is a political weapon and that it's an election topic and that it's an election issue and that it's the big October scare that came. Um, but yeah, I'm only going to touch on that briefly because, the coronavirus is another topic, but I only mention that just because it has to do with the election. But I do think Joe Biden is going to touch on it a bit more, but not exactly that much more when he wins. I do think the media is going to praise Joe Biden for his efforts on um, the coronavirus, which he's going to do, which, I mean, I don't think he's going to do that much, but yeah, that's more of a topic for another time. But yeah, I'm just saying that the media is going to praise Joe Biden for how he handles the coronavirus and is going to shit on Trump for a little bit more while he's still in office about his response to the coronavirus, but not as much because the election's over. Um, but yeah, I will be touching more on that in future videos, but I just wanted to just mention that briefly. But yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, no.
All right. So, um, yeah. So the election, it's still going on, guys. But yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. I'd say I'd say definitely just don't just keep paying attention, but don't pay attention too much because this can all be pretty stressful. But yeah, this is about all we had to cover for today. Yeah, this is the election. Definitely stay tuned for further developments and what's going to happen. But so before we go, we should we should talk about positivity because here's the thing about this: a whole lot of what we've been talking about isn't positive. It's very stressful stuff concerned with our lives. So I think we should take a few minutes to talk about some things that are positive in the world and our lives, even if they're little things. So, so Swift, do you have anything positive to say?
I don't know. Here's the thing. This would be another new topic, so
Well,
I just really think we should wrap this up.
well, so well, it's okay to talk about it for just a tiny bit if it's positive. Is it a positive topic, by the way?
I mean, I guess
Well, by all means, share if
we
you.
really should be just getting to wrap this up,
Oh,
if you don't mind.
well,
I mean, I can just log off and you can talk about whatever topic you like
well, I mean, well,
with
this is
the
almost done.
listeners, I guess.
Well, this is almost done, but are you okay with talking about something positive at least just for a tiny bit?
A tiny bit. Like, it's been like 2 hours and a half
Oh, it
thus
has.
far, and yes, it has. And I told you specifically that
Oh,
I couldn't only
well,
be for less than 2 hours. So
oh,
if we're already going way over time,
oh.
yeah,
Well,
it's getting
well,
really late.
yes.
I really can't make noise.
Well, all right. So, yeah, sure, that's fine. I mean, so it's kind of a so the positivity thing. I just kind of wanted to include it as just a section of this, but I mean, I guess we don't have to. Um, uh, I guess not. I mean, it's not really too relevant anyway. I just so the whole point of it is I just want people to not exactly live in fear because we live in a very fearful world today. So I do think people should have things to look forward to. Um, but yeah, I just gotta say, um, I'm just gonna say this just for just a few seconds, just as a quick outro. We're gonna wrap this up really quick. I'm just gonna say, we're all still here. We're all still alive. We still have things to look forward to. All this scary stuff is temporary. Just, just stay positive, guys, and just look forward to the good things in life. But yeah, uh, yeah. I'm sorry if you didn't really want to talk about that for a bit. Um, yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, this was a fun little bit.
Yeah, it was
So yeah,
absolutely.
I will probably join for future podcasts,
Okay, for sure. Yeah, for
most
sure.
likely,
That sounds good.
for other topics.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to have you on in the future. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
anyway,
cool.
thank you for coming on, Swift. I'd say this is a very great and productive episode.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah,
Thank you too.
yeah. So anyway, yeah, guys, that's about it. Stay tuned for the next episode. Yeah, it was a great time. Peace out.